Welcome back. It seems some of you didn't believe me in this video when I said that it was a summarization of my thoughts on Monopoly Cheaters Edition. Well, if you're looking at the length of this video, perhaps you'll believe me now. That's right, I'm going to tear even deeper into the rotting corpse of the game I butchered last time, and maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to put MCE behind me once and for all. Monopoly Cheaters Edition is the worst tabletop game I have ever played, so allow me to give you my more complete thoughts on it. In all seriousness, the Monopoly Cheaters Edition video is by far the most popular video on my channel, and I'm glad that almost everyone seemed to enjoy it. This video was made as a direct sequel to that one, so if you somehow have been recommended this video without seeing the first, I'll leave a link in the description. Trust me, this video will make no sense unless you watch the first video for context. Anyway, let's dig into why this video was even made in the first place. To tell you the truth, reading through the comments of the last video fueled me to make this sequel slowly but surely. Every direct personal attack and logical fallacy and objectively incorrect statement attempting to defend MCE gave me the ideas and motivation for what a second part would look like. But it was actually this comment, this one comment in particular, that pushed me over the edge, and I began writing the script for this video the day after I saw it. Let's break this comment down piece by piece. This video seems poorly argued, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with this statement as long as they have something to back it up. I mean, this comment is a paragraph long, so they have more than enough text to make a real statement here. You just explain what you think is wrong without delving into why it is wrong. What I think is wrong, huh? As if literally everything I discussed in the video is a matter of opinion. This completely ignores the actual analysis I did on MCE itself. The game mechanics are objectively flawed from a game design perspective, so it's not a matter of me thinking it, it's just me laying out the facts. I'll elaborate on this even more later. And apparently 47 minutes just wasn't delving deep enough for this person. But don't worry, that's also partially why this video exists. Although I think it's funny how they don't clarify what they actually want me to delve deeper into in this sentence. Also, you fail to mention counter-arguments that most people would think of. Ooh hoo hoo. So you expect me to address counter-arguments without knowing what they are. How illogical. Thankfully, providing and addressing counter-arguments are partially what the YouTube comments are for, and as you may have noticed, I have responded to every single comment, including counter-arguments to my video, so if you really needed more in-depth explanations, there you go. The rest of this sentence actually provides two examples of the counter-arguments this commenter would like addressed, and don't worry, I'll be sure to address them both later in this video, just for this commenter. I'm thoughtful like that. Some criticisms you make are valid, but you substantiate so few of them. Notice how this person took the time to write out this long comment, but didn't bother specifying which of my points they thought were valid and which of my points actually needed substantiating. If they really wanted me to substantiate specific points, wouldn't they mention at least one of them? Apparently I don't need that information. And then we have my absolute favorite line in the entire comment. I don't mean to hate, but I definitely feel like you could do better. Breathe that one in. Don't you just love blatantly contradictory statements? I don't mean to hate, but insert hate here. It's a real classic, honestly. It doesn't get much more comical than this. Now don't get the wrong idea, this is not an invitation to attack haters in the YouTube comments. I blurred this person's name and profile picture for a reason. In fact, I encourage you to thank the haters if possible, because if it weren't for them, this video wouldn't exist, and this video is partially dedicated to them, so thank you, haters, for the unrelenting source of motivation. And thank you, random commenter, for writing this brick of text and being the driving force of this episode. You're literally the only person who had the audacity to imply that 47 minutes of ranting wasn't enough for you, so I appreciate your honesty. Even then though, the ratio of people who agreed with me compared to the people who don't is about 99 to 1, so pro-MCE commenters and comments are shockingly rare. Especially since most of them actually went back and deleted their argumentative comments after I countered their counter-arguments. Got 'em. As if I wouldn't remember the essays you all sent me. That's actually the theme of this video for the most part, addressing points and counter-arguments that were commonly spotted in the comments of the last video, and providing you, the audience, with a more in-depth version of the counter-arguments I provided them. If my tone seems hostile at any point, I promise it's not directed at anyone who is respectful with their tone and their arguments in the comments of the last video. If you get that vibe from anything that I'm saying, it's only directed at actively hateful people, but again, almost all of you are totally awesome. I seriously think most of the counter-arguments I mentioned in this video can be found in less than 100 comments out of the 3,700 some total comments on the last video. And a lot of you presented your counter-arguments in a respectful way, and I appreciate that. And like I said, most people who left disrespectfully worded comments went back and deleted their comments after I countered them. In summary, you all are great. As you can imagine, I have a lot of points and counter-arguments to cover, so I've divided them into 4 categories for organization's sake. With that all being said, allow me to present the first category. Category 1. Counterpoints against me and my experience. This first category has to do with the story I told at the beginning of the last video, as well as my experience actually playing Monopoly Cheaters Edition, or MCE. Several comments criticized me directly or the way that I played MCE, so these points are mostly here to set the record straight. I'll be going over points one by one in whatever level of detail I see fit. That goes for the whole video. You must have been playing it wrong. Comments that claimed this varied greatly. One common thing that they'd often bring up is how cheats get replaced with new ones once they're used, and because I claimed I was getting spammed with the same cheat over and over, I must have been playing incorrectly. That claim would have been correct had I not been playing Ultimate Cheaters mode at the time, so yeah. Even then, there are only 15 cheats, and 5 of them are on the board at once. And given at least one cheat is being used every turn on average, it wouldn't be long before the same cheat would reappear to torment you. In all seriousness though, that was the first time that any of us had played the game, and that day I personally read the rules for MCE out loud, so we were all on the same page. We had the rules in front of us the whole time, and I had the official PDF in front of me when I was writing the script for the first part, as well as right now. You'll just have to take my word for it that we were playing the game as Hasbro intended, as much as the intended way of play sucks. You could just add the removed mechanics back and/or change the rules you don't like. I feel like this goes for most of the arguments in this video, but there are several comments that made this claim that weren't actually meant to defend MCE. But there were also others that were, so I'm choosing to cover it. Yes, you most certainly could, and in my opinion you absolutely should do this if you plan on tolerating MCE for any length of time. But just because I could change MCE to be a better experience does not mean that the game is better than I say it is, or that the game shouldn't be criticized as harshly. By changing the game from its base format, you quite literally change the game, and I'd have to do an entirely separate review of your modded MCE. Like, oh yeah man, this game is freaking great, all you gotta do is... test cards that involve the cheats. Like, yeah, obviously the game is going to be better when you address the obvious flaws I pointed out in the other video. If you're playing MCE in an altered state, you're not playing MCE, and you're not playing the game I talked about for 47 minutes. I'm choosing to talk about MCE for what it is, and not what it could be if its issues were fixed. But seriously, if you're actually considering playing this game, change the rules however you see fit. No matter what you do, it will almost certainly be better. You're just bad at cheating. Get good. Okay, if you insist. I'm sure you were there with us, right? So you have first-hand experience necessary to make that call? Cool. I don't even know why I'm addressing this one. I mean, it's clear that people who leave comments like this and aren't just doing some silly trolling either didn't pay attention to the video, or couldn't think of any counter-argument they could get me with, so this is their reflexive keyboard muscle memory response. I'll just let them continue to believe that they're right. Conceding is not something you should complain about. I feel I need to make it even more clear exactly what occurred when I was playing Monopoly with that one friend, and I need to inform some of you what the word conceding means in the context of tabletop gaming. So when you concede at a board game, it means that you are quitting the game for whatever reason, and respectfully admitting that your opponent is the winner. Conceding in longer or high strategy games is common, where partway through the game it may become abundantly clear that at some point earlier in the game, you may have made a mistake which will inevitably cost you the win. For the sake of everyone's time, you can choose to concede and declare your opponent victorious. What that one friend of mine did during those games of Monopoly that predate the MCE incident was not conceding. I'm not sure why some of you incorrectly assumed it was only me and that one friend playing Monopoly, especially when I described the situation and confirmed multiple times that there were other players present. When that one friend chose to say, "I want to be done," they did not quit the game or concede on their own, they ended the game completely for all players, many of which had a realistic chance at winning. This happened multiple times. This is not what conceding is. Not to mention, this entire act was incredibly disrespectful to everyone and their time. If you're going to call me out in the comments for being an inconsiderate friend and saying I have no reason to be frustrated about the situation, at least try to learn all of the details of the situation before you do so. At least take all of the blatant information present in the video into account anyway. This game works just fine if you play casually, or nobody tries to win as hard as you did. The problem is that you played optimally. Really now? Huh. That is so interesting. What an interesting little creature you are. Hey, would you mind taking a step closer? I want to ask you a question. Yeah, so, when you're playing a game, would you rather win or would you rather lose? That's absolutely right, you'd want to win. If you said lose, you're either lying, trolling me, or not a human. I don't really care, and I'm just making a point. Take it from me, a game designer, you cannot design a game and expect everyone who ever plays it to not play the game in an optimal way. You can't design a game where you expect every single person to ever play it in the history of its existence to not try to win to the best of their ability. Genuinely, this is one of the most baffling arguments I've encountered in my entire life. So the reason that I didn't enjoy MCE is because I played optimally. Because I try to win a game in which there is a winner, and the game itself places you in direct competition with other players, I had a miserable experience? Is that what's actually being implied by this? If this game was designed to punish players who attempt to use the rules of the game to the fullest and players who take the game seriously in any capacity, then that's just another reason why this game is terribly designed. Whoa, hey man, what are you doing? Are you trying to win? Are you bringing effort into this casual experience? Get out of here, bro. This also is another case of people pretending to know the social dynamics of an event they weren't a part of. I understand that everyone's definition of try-harding is different, but half of my friends are gamers. Experienced tabletop gamers. Even the non-tabletop gamer friends present were all actively trying to win, at least in the first game of MCE. If you expect nobody playing to try their best to win, believe me, if you try to make a game with that concept in mind, it will fail. One of the many reasons I'm choosing to judge MCE so harshly is because it was made by the third largest toy and game company in the world. And they should know that people want to win games at this point, so they would never design a game with the opposite in mind. Dude doesn't know how to say no to people. It's one thing to criticize me, it's another thing to criticize my video, but it's another thing entirely to pretend you know better about a situation you weren't present for, and calling me out on it, as I've already stated. I chose not to go into the specifics in the other video about the full situation and social dynamics of that one friend, for their sake, and I won't go into any further details in this video either. You're just going to have to take my word for it that accepting to play Monopoly was the most peaceful resolution to the situation at the time. Was the entire thing flawed? Yes. But I was respectful and accepted the invitation to play base Monopoly. After all, I'm a gamer, I enjoy playing games, and I enjoy Monopoly, despite how much I had played it at that point. I can still be frustrated about the situation that followed because those are my feelings and experiences, and I'll leave it at that. If you left a comment like that and you were referring to the 2 games of MCE that I played, you probably just missed the part in the last video where I said, quote, "I made it clear that I didn't want to play the game, but we played it anyway." Remember that? I sure do. Not only did I write it into the script of the last video, but I was also there, you know, experiencing the situation. Your arguments are childish and you over-exaggerate. No, you're wrong. Those are actually my real unfiltered feelings on MCE. There are not many impactless things in the world that I hate more than MCE. The fact that larger reactions are better for YouTube audiences didn't affect my recording or writing process at all. That's also why I'm choosing to record this video the way I'm currently recording it. The last video is genuinely how I feel about MCE. That video is the only video, until now, on my channel like that, for that reason. Because I genuinely hate MCE. Ask any of my friends and they'll tell you how passionate I am over hating MCE. I'm so passionate now that I've made 2 incredibly long video essays on the topic so far, so needless to say my feelings on this topic are strong, and they warrant strong reactions. Not sure why you would think my arguments are childish though. If they really are childish in nature, then it should be relatively easy to counter them, right? MCE is a social deduction game and you're not playing it like one. Alright class, can anyone tell me what you do in a basic social deduction game? Just simple, classic, baseline social deduction mechanics? I'll give you a bit to think about it. Time's up. What did you come up with? No, you do not buy and trade properties. No, you do not cheat, even if the game says the cheat is actually a rule and not a cheat. It's a lot more simple than you think. You just have to deduce something socially, if you can believe it. I have been playing social deduction and hidden role games for the majority of my life at this point. I've even made one. It's called Massacards, you know, the centerpiece of the branding of this channel. I can say with confidence that MCE is not a social deduction game, and I don't understand why so many people in the comments claimed that not only is MCE a social deduction game, but that because I'm not playing the game as a social deduction game, that I'm playing the game incorrectly. What a twisted argument. How would you suggest I play the game differently then, What would I need to do to play this non-existent social deduction version of MCE that you're speaking of without contradicting the actual rules of MCE? I'll wait. Actually, I don't need to wait at all because there's nothing to say. There are no social deduction mechanics in MCE, and contrary to popular belief, sleight of hand and getting caught are not comparable to actual deduction. You aren't the target demographic for this game. The general consensus in the comments was that this game was designed for Monopoly haters. Even if that is the case, people who hate Monopoly still hate MCE. This game is universally hated as much as the 0.1% of people who like it would disagree. This Monopoly was made for nobody. It was made for money. And it made its money. Now that it's past its initial hype, it truly is worthless. That doesn't change the fact that this game is advertised as a family game, and that encompasses almost all ages and demographics. Moving on to Category 2, Counterpoints against Base Monopoly and how they relate to MCE. A lot of people seem to want to attack Base Monopoly in the comments, with the relevance being, well, if X was a known issue of Base Monopoly, then it would be an issue with MCE as well. I'll be countering these points by defending Base Monopoly for the most part, and proving that MCE can be the worst game ever all on its own. Generally speaking, Monopoly is a bad game, and therefore MCE is as well. It's definitely fair to compare the two games, I'll touch more on that later, but saying MCE is bad just because Base Monopoly is bad is a bit extreme, don't you think? I mean, I gave you 47 minutes worth of reasons why MCE is bad, so it's a bit strange that you singled out this as your reasoning for agreeing with me, especially when I never said anything bad about Base Monopoly. There were actually a lot of comments that dissed Base Monopoly with no follow-up argument, and without even addressing the real problem game and the subject of the video. I get it though. Some of you may not have a space to vent your frustrations about Base Monopoly, and this was the only place to do it. Alright, but I'd like to restate that I don't think Base Monopoly is a bad game, and I'm sure you all know at least one person who likes it. So even if you hate Base Monopoly, you have to admit it has something that people like. The main issue with MCE is the cheats, and that's why I went over them in an objective way. When you stop and think about the cheats of MCE for even a moment, you'll realize how fundamentally broken they are, and that's why I spent so long talking about them. In fact, the cheats are so broken, let's talk about a common game-breaking exploit that was repeatedly pointed out in the comments that I didn't even cover. I mean, why wouldn't I? It only strengthens my argument. I'd like to state for the record that this exploit is 100% legal in MCE. Believe me, I checked the rulebook. Using the Frame Another Player chance card and the bank heist cheat, you can steal literally all of the money from the bank, play the chance card to force whoever called you out for cheating to take your cheating punishment while you escape without a scratch. And congratulations, you've successfully won the game because there is no more money in the bank, and you have all of it. And unlike in base Monopoly, there are no IOU bank rules in MCE. When the bank runs out of money, it's out of money. So just keep your eye on your money, buy everything you land on, bankrupt everyone, or more accurately, end the game early because nobody is going to try now. There are a couple more infinite money exploits, but they're all very similar in setup to this one. But my point is, actually breaking the game is not only possible, it's relatively easy to do. I feel like this is actually one of MCE's worst offenses. You can literally dismantle the entire game over the course of a single turn in some cases. People still think this game is good, can you believe it? Monopoly was designed as a demonstration of the consequences and dangers of monopolies in capitalism and is a bad game because of it, and MCE is a more extreme interpretation. So, a little bit of a summarized history lesson here. Back in 1906, one Elizabeth Maggie created the Landlord's game. And to put things simply, this is the game that would slowly morph into the Monopoly we know today. The Landlord's game was a critique of monopolies in capitalism and their dangers, and the result was a game that not everyone enjoyed, and that theme still persists today. For the most part, when people commented about the Landlord's game, they meant it as a joke or as a fun fact, but there were others who took it a step further, essentially implying that any game with direct ties to Monopoly is awful and bad, and it was designed to be that way. I mean, for one, like I said before, some people enjoy base Monopoly, and if you're not willing to take that into consideration when making an argument, that's on you. I understand that some of you like MCE as well, but when the reasons you like MCE are debunkable or counter-argumentable, like almost all of them seem to be, then that's a completely different story. Monopoly isn't an objectively bad game, while there are many aspects of MCE that are objectively poorly designed, which I went over in my last video. For 2, Monopoly has come a long way since its creation as the Landlord's game. Sure, the Landlord's game was meant to be a critique in some ways, but it was still meant to be a game. And then that game got slightly redesigned by the Parker brothers when they acquired the rights to it, and then that game got slightly redesigned several times over by Hasbro when they acquired the rights to it. While we're here, can we talk about Hasbro for a second? Hasbro is currently the 3rd largest toys and games company in the entire world. They themselves have several real-world monopolies in several areas of their market. A large chunk of their market lives in the United States, a capitalist country. It would be absolutely foolish for the 3rd largest toys and games company in the world to push for the capitalism critique route of advertising in one of their most successful and marketable and licensable game brands. Ever since Hasbro acquired the rights to Monopoly, they haven't been advertising it as a capitalism system game, they've been advertising it as a fast-dealing, property-trading game. So to think that MCE, a spin-off of Monopoly, maintains its critique of capitalism as a core design element is kind of silly. Of course, if someone can prove otherwise via an official statement from Hasbro, I'd love to see it. Send me a link. Also, one small point I want to cover is the tagline, Fast Dealing Property Trading Game. The Fast Dealing Property Trading Game tagline. In my original video, I pointed out that MCE is trying to be a faster version of Monopoly when it doesn't need to be. I said that MCE doesn't advertise itself as a faster version of Monopoly, so there's no need for these detrimental changes. Some people claim that this tagline is meant to be an advertisement for MCE's new fast way of playing. This is completely false. There are several versions of Monopoly besides MCE that have the same tagline and don't have the speed changes MCE makes, including Base Monopoly and Monopoly Longest Game Ever. So that's clearly not the intention of this tagline. Additionally, if this were an advertisement for MCE's mechanical changes, this is one of the worst ways to do it. Fast dealing. The word people latch onto is the word fast, but because the word dealing is right there, the argument falls apart. What does this imply? That the properties are given to or dealt out to players in a quick fashion? No, because MCE has the same space landing auction system that base Monopoly has, so nothing has even been made faster there. Alternatively, this could imply that the rate at which players make deals is fast, but that's a claim that nobody can back up because the act of trading and making deals is a completely player-controlled mechanic, and there's nothing to speed it up in MCE. In fact, it's the same as in base Monopoly. So no matter how you look at it, this tagline does not do anything to describe or advertise MCE's mechanical changes. Anyway, that one was a bit of a side tangent. While we're here, let's talk about one of the most common arguments against base Monopoly that I saw. Monopoly takes no skill, is therefore a bad game, and MCE is probably bad for the same reason or whatever. Every time I see this comment, I laugh, because it's objectively wrong, and yet so many people say this with such anger and confidence. Who's teaching you this? When it comes to tabletop gaming, skill and strategy often go hand in hand, but strategy is the thing that often takes the lead, so I'm assuming people mean to say MCE takes no strategy. But just in case people actually meant what they said when they say Monopoly takes no skill, let's talk about skill first. Funnily enough, this statement is still objectively wrong. The skills you must employ when you're playing base Monopoly are debate and negotiation. Negotiating trades is a huge part of Monopoly, and it seems a lot of people forget that. Not only when they make these claims, but also when they criticize me for having long games of Monopoly, as if playing a long game of Monopoly is irregular in some way. Monopoly is typically a long game, and the main reason for that game's length, in my experience, is the length of time people take to make property trades and negotiate. Seriously, negotiations take up somewhere between a third and a half of the total playtime in my experience. People left comments saying things like, "Bro, Monopoly takes an hour max. Literally, what is wrong with you?" If your games of Monopoly are actually an hour long, at maximum, then it's likely you're just rolling dice going around the board buying properties and not engaging with the negotiation portion of the game at all. And maybe that's why you aren't enjoying Monopoly, and maybe that's why you think Monopoly takes no skill, because you're actively choosing to not engage with the one part of the game that requires a skill. But that's just my speculation. I'm not actually going to claim that you, the people who left those comments, deliberately chose not to use the negotiation mechanics, because I don't know anything about you or the games of Monopoly that you have played. Moving on to the alternative interpretation of this statement, Monopoly takes no strategy. There are actually lots more strategies at play in Monopoly than skills necessary. People often like to point at the 3 random chance game mechanics, those being the dice, the chance cards, and the community chest cards, and claim that because there is so much randomness present in the game, no strategy is required. This is simply not the case. While 3 randomness mechanics may be a bit much for some people, it's hard to find a game these days that is totally devoid of any randomness. Chess is a game with no randomness at all, but that's literally the only board game that I own that doesn't have at least one randomness mechanic. Take that how you will. Even with 3 randomness mechanics, Monopoly is far from a game without strategy, like LCR and Chutes and Ladders. Those games are actually both strategyless and skillless, and could effectively play themselves if they could roll their own dice. Comparing those games to Monopoly is absurd. There are tons of strategies in Monopoly. Allow me to list a few examples. Recognizing dice probability and using it to your advantage, choosing when to buy a property and when to let it go to auction, knowing when to buy houses or hotels and how many to buy, managing your money for multiple turns in the future, knowing who to negotiate with and what you want, and finding a way to get it. Understanding what you could part with should you need to sell or mortgage properties. Using the values of properties and their respective house and hotel prices to determine which property sets are right for you and your game in your current state. Wow, look at all of those strategic things. All things that require strategy. Do you still think Monopoly requires no strategy? Several comments said something like, "Monopoly has no strategy, you just buy every property you land on and hope you win." That in itself is one of many strategies you could employ, and you're actually acknowledging the existence of strategy and alternate strategies in Monopoly by saying this. All of this being said, the argument that base Monopoly requires no skill or strategy is objectively flawed, and therefore that specific argument can't be applied to MCE. If anything, MCE requires more skills and less strategy, because sleight of hand is a skill and not a strategy. And a lot of strategies present in base Monopoly have been effectively buried by the cheats in MCE, so I guess if you want a more skill-based game, quote-unquote, you should totally play MCE instead of base Monopoly, and forget about all of the other inherent flaws of the game while doing so. Seems logical to me. Alright, Category 3. Points made in the comments that strengthen my argument. Let's switch it up a little with this next category. I'm going to cover the really big points with this category, and I suppose the whole infinite money exploit falls into this category as well, so keep that one in the back of your head. I'm going over these ones now only because the final category will be my final points about MCE itself. Monopoly speed exists, so there's no reason for MCE to go fast. Indeed, many of MCE's unnecessary changes and exclusions were made to shorten the playtime of the game and to cater to Monopoly haters, even though the game never advertised itself in this way, and yet there is at least one version of Monopoly whose entire purpose is to be a faster version of base Monopoly that fills that niche, making the changes in MCE somehow even more pointless. Monopoly Speed is a Monopoly version dedicated to and advertised as a faster version of Monopoly. So if that's really what you wanted out of MCE for whatever reason, Monopoly Speed is the game for you. I cannot stress enough how pointless buying MCE really is. Removing houses removes strategy. As I mentioned earlier, the house economy in base Monopoly is one of the key pieces of the strategy, and removing them gives players a lot less options, forcing them to rely on the broken cheat system even more. In base Monopoly, there are only so many houses to go around, and that's why a common game-winning strategy is to fill your properties with houses, but never finish upgrading them to hotels. So other players have to fight over whatever houses are left, and overall make less money than your properties with 3 or 4 houses. This is why house strategies are so important, and MCE removes them completely. The hotel economy is not nearly as scarce in MCE, and as I covered in the last video, getting your hands on a hotel is beyond easy thanks to the cheat system and the special cards of MCE. All of that thought put into deciding when exactly you should purchase your houses has been eradicated, and in MCE the most logical thing to do is to get hotels on every property you own as soon as possible, because in most cases you get them for free, eliminating the risk of actually purchasing them. Once again, as I covered in the previous video, buying hotels legitimately, and in fact, doing anything legitimately, is a suboptimal move in MCE. It's in your best interest to cheat at every opportunity, so your brain goes from strategizing for the future and cleverly manipulating your opponents to cheat, 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 because that's all you need to win this game. Base Monopoly's mechanics might as well not be there. If you're encouraged to cheat, it is not fun to cheat. Precisely. Being told to cheat removes a part of the thrill of cheating in the first place. It's like when you planned on doing the dishes and you had it all scheduled out in your mind, and then your beautiful wife walks in and says, "Honey, sweetie, baby gravy, could you please do the dishes?" And you just sit there and sulk like, well, now I'm not doing it. Not to mention that the cheats in MCE aren't actually cheats, they are intended mechanics. And if you do something against the rules that isn't included in those cheats, that's simply not allowed, and is actual cheating. If the cheats of MCE were rebranded as actual mechanics, maybe I wouldn't have this issue with the game, but these counterintuitive rules certainly don't help its image. Here we are at Category 4, addressing counterpoints to why MCE is bad. These are the counterpoints to my video that actually attempt to defend MCE, if you can believe it. I'll start with the more general points and work towards the more specific ones. Let's start this category with the 2 example counterarguments this lovely commenter chose to provide me. The handcuff doesn't actually need to stay connected to the board. Talk about one of the easiest counter-arguments to counter. If you took a moment of your time to read the rules, you'd see you actually do need to have the handcuff connected to the board. Says so right there. There's nothing to imply the contrary. Not sure why this would be an example argument specifically chosen to prove a point when there is no argument to be made in the first place. The claim is just flat out incorrect. It really makes me think about how many people who left comments like this have actually played MCE and felt compelled to defend it, and how many people are sending comments like this just because they want to, or because they were fishing for the clown emoji. Why can't you just take your things with you when you have to leave the table so you don't get stolen from? So just to be clear, this argument revolves around the idea that if you're worried about getting your properties and money and whatever else stolen or messed with because you have to do something like use the bathroom, grab a snack, or pour a drink for yourself, you should just grab everything you own and bring it with you wherever you go, eliminating that risk entirely. I honestly had to ponder where to even begin with this point. I guess let's start with the obvious. Let's say you actually do choose to take everything with you. Are you going to the bathroom? Gross, dude. Game components should never make their way into the bathroom. Imagine if you didn't wash your hands, which some people are known to do. Disgusting. Even if you did wash your hands, though, you run the risk of getting the paper money and property cards wet and permanently damaging them. Oh, it's okay, I'll just put them in my pocket, no big deal. Yet another way to permanently damage the game components. The paper money is made out of paper, so you're definitely going to crease it in several places. And the property cards aren't made out of durable cardstock, they're actually made out of a thin, glossy paperboard or something of that nature. What this means is that it's also really easy to crease and ruin them, or tear them, or wear away the edges. The wetness argument could also be applied if you were going to the kitchen. What if you spilled your drink on the cards? What if you got your Cheeto dust all over the game components? Why are the game components in the kitchen? All valid questions. But maybe you don't care about the safety and longevity of your game components, or personal hygiene. But don't worry, I'm not done with this point. Let's consider the fact that removing game components from the play area is clearly not the developer's intended way for you to play the game. The reason this isn't countered anywhere in the rules of MCE is because the idea is so absurd that Hasbro didn't think it would be necessary to clarify. The game clearly wasn't designed with this maneuver in mind, which brings me to my next point. The moment you use this tactic in MCE, you completely destroy the game. Think about it for just a moment. The second you decide to remove what you own from the reach of other players, you have just created an unfair game. You have effectively made yourself immune to the most devastating cheats, the ones where your money and properties are stolen, and because all of the other players are still viable targets for theft, the game is now heavily placed in your favor. This breaks the game. If your group is genuinely okay with allowing this to happen, then what's stopping every player from grabbing everything they own, sitting 6 feet away from the board, and only approaching it when they need to take their turn? Don't you dare mention the handcuff, because that can only affect one player at a time. So tell me, what's stopping your group from doing this? Nothing, really. Congratulations, you've just trivialized several intended cheat mechanics, even more so than they already trivialized other existing mechanics. Does this new version of the game you've brought upon yourself sound fun to you? I hope not. Dude, this entire dilemma could be avoided if the people you played with were nice and understood not to use the cheats against you if you need to leave the table. You could still use this to your advantage. If you stayed away from the table for longer than you needed to, and you decided to carry everything you own, or even just a single property or bill, you still gain a similar unfair advantage over other players, even if you chose to carry nothing. And that's only in the rare scenario that your group all choose not to play the game in the intended way, and all choose not to use this moment to their advantage, in a game all about cheating, and a game that actively encourages you to screw over other players at every opportunity in several ways, and rewards you greatly for doing so. It's not like anyone would be breaking the rules of the game, otherwise known as real cheating, if they stole your stuff while you were gone, so why wouldn't they do it? It's a game, after all. It's not like their playstyle actually says anything about their real-world character. Ugh, I'm sick of this topic. There's just so much wrong with it. It's so stupid. I'm moving on because I still have several more points to cover. Why can't you just get up and do whatever you gotta do during your turn so players can't get away with cheating while you're gone? What did I just say? Ugh. Please think about what you're saying. There's nothing in the rules that state you can't cheat out of turn. In fact, it's encouraged. And there's nothing limiting the amount of cheats that can be executed per turn. Even if you did wait until your turn, like the smarty pants you are, and then decide to go to the bathroom or whatever, meaning the game cannot progress until you roll the dice at the start of your turn, that doesn't mean players are forbidden from stealing your stuff while you're gone. You would return to all of your things being stolen, and sure, you'd have the opportunity to get your stuff back, but you would need to call out each individual cheat performed and correctly guess which player did which cheat, which is essentially random at this point because you have no information to go on, so good luck. Oh, and let's not forget, if you incorrectly accuse someone of doing a specific cheat, you suffer the punishments. Congratulations, you're bankrupt, and nothing has changed from my argument in the last video. That's it, I'm done with this point. Moving on. Isn't this game made for kids? No. It's made for everyone 8 and up. It's right there on the front of the box. It's a family game meant for families. I'm judging this as a game that almost anyone is meant to play, because that's what it is. This game is not advertised as a version of Monopoly meant for younger people, and this is provable because the Monopoly Junior line exists, and that series of games is meant for kids, or teaching kids about regular Monopoly. Even if this game was made purely for kids, this is likely not the thing you'd want to teach them. The game was designed to be sped up because you need to focus so much on what's happening. Probably not, unless Hasbro themselves recognized the product they were releasing is so tedious, stressful, broken, and awful, they realized they could likely get better board game reviews if people spent the least amount of time playing as possible. Imagine admitting defeat indirectly like that. Very unlikely. As I mentioned previously, the game is most likely shortened to cater to Monopoly haters, the intended demographic of the game. That seems like the most obvious explanation, but there could be smaller, less significant ones here or there. I'm not going to pretend that Hasbro would be willing to admit they made a crappy product though, so we'll actually likely never know the real answer to this one. The utilities and railroads were bad anyway. Glad they're gone. I don't get it, dude. Given the choice between having more game for less money and having less game for more money, I'd always choose the former. I can partially understand why someone would think the utilities are useless because, let's face it, they are the two worst properties in base Monopoly. But that doesn't mean they're worthless. They're still two unique spaces that contain a mechanic that's also unique to them. There's still properties on the board that you can choose to buy and use or let go to auction. The railroads, on the other hand, are a completely different story. The railroads are uniquely powerful. As I said in the last video, they are the only property group with 4 spaces instead of 2 or 3. And instead of needing to collect them all to start increasing their rent prices, they get stronger all on their own as you collect them. No houses or hotels required. Regardless, even if you deem both the railroads and the utilities as so useless that you yourself would never buy them in a game of base Monopoly, why would you want them gone? It's not like Monopoly is a very complex game. Just having these spaces available gives players a lot more strategic avenues to traverse, and removing these spaces removes that strategy. Or you could think of it this way. At the very least, these properties can exist for other players besides you to buy, and if you think they're truly useless, then you would likely be more willing to allow your opponents to waste their money buying these properties so that you have a greater chance of bankrupting them with your more substantial properties. If you still don't see the merit in keeping the old properties around, luckily for you, there are several spin-offs of modern Monopoly that use the same design philosophy that MCE uses. Tax and utility spaces being greatly simplified or removed, the railroads being simplified or transformed into something else entirely. You can play those games instead if this is the issue you truly want to latch onto. There is no reason to defend MCE and or prefer it over any other version of Monopoly. The only truly original aspect of Monopoly Cheaters Edition are the cheats, as well as the mechanics with direct ties to the cheats. So please believe me, if you deem MCE's other changes or additions as merits, then you can get that same enjoyment out of other Monopoly versions without the insane drawbacks that the cheats provide. This game is called Monopoly Cheaters Edition. Of course you need to cheat. Pretty much every comment that made this claim misunderstood one of the points I made in the first video. In that video, I describe how the cheats are so powerful that cheating is the optimal strategy for essentially every aspect of the game. Comments like these chose to interpret my argument in an unexpected way, leading to counters like this one, where people assume that I expect to be able to play a game of MCE and have a chance at winning without actually cheating. Obviously, this is not something I claimed and definitely not what I meant when I covered this topic originally. The problem is not that you can't win the game without cheating. The problem is that there is no reason to do anything other than cheat. The cheats in MCE are so powerful that they are the only mechanic you need to obtain victory, leading to a 100% skill-based game. While there is nothing wrong with a 100% skill-based game on their own, the real root of the problem is what the cheats do to the rest of the mechanics in the game, most of which are from base Monopoly. Because the cheats are so powerful, there is no reason to obtain money via rent. There's no reason to buy properties legitimately. There's no reason to acquire money legitimately. There's no reason to purchase hotels. There is no reason to negotiate. There's no reason to engage with almost every single mechanic from base Monopoly, and for that reason, they might as well not exist. There's no reason for this game to be called Monopoly Cheaters Edition because the Monopoly side of things is completely meaningless. It should just be called Cheaters Edition, honestly. I've said this multiple times in the comments of the first video, but in my opinion, I think the cheat mechanics present in MCE would thrive in an environment that was built specifically for them, rather than being hastily glued onto Monopoly. If the cheats were part of a standalone game, with no ties to Monopoly, and the game they were a part of was built from the ground up with the cheats in mind, I genuinely think that almost all of my problems with this game would disappear. The cheats demand so much attention, and are so powerful in the context of MCE, that all of the returning mechanics from base Monopoly become completely obsolete and non-optimal. The Monopoly portion of Monopoly Cheaters Edition has been left almost completely forgotten by those new unique mechanics, and that is one of the most prominent problems with what is supposed to be a Monopoly spin-off game. What if you just said no when someone asks if they can see the property or card that you're concealing from them on purpose? For those that don't remember, there are some mechanics in MCE that involve being sneaky and doing this little trick called lying. One of these mechanics is the price gouging cheat, where you secretly charge another player more rent than what they actually owe. Another example is the counterfeit chance cheat, which allows you to make up the rules for a chance card you draw. The rule can be literally anything, and if you succeed, you actually reap the rewards of your fake chance card you just made up. I feel like I don't need to go into why that cheat alone could shatter the game, but that's besides the point. In the last video, I said the simple counter to mechanics like this is to simply ask to see the card in question, at which point it would be instantly revealed the other player was lying, making these mechanics ultimately useless. This counter-argument attempts to debunk my debunking of these mechanics by claiming you could just refuse to show anyone the card in question, turning it into a real bluffing game. Maybe this was the hidden social deduction mechanic that was being referred to earlier. Obviously not. These mechanics were not designed with the social deduction genre in mind. In fact, there's nothing to help you deduce the true answer except for prior knowledge and experience in MCE, hence this is a simple bluffing mechanic. Funnily enough, if this were the case, if you could and did say no when asked to reveal the card that's being questioned, it actually loops right back around to one of the other arguments I made last video on the same subject. That argument being, if this was the case, then MCE would be extremely punishing for new players, as well as players who didn't bother memorizing every single possible rent price, as well as every chance card and every community chest card. This is not something that games should ever do. Once again, you cannot expect players to memorize all of this repeating information, especially on their first time playing. That's just terrible game design, so no matter how you swing it, these mechanics suck. Accept it. How about you judge MCE on its own merits instead of comparing it to base Monopoly? Comments that said something along these lines weren't very common, admittedly, but those that did sure did delete themselves when I replied to them for some reason. This argument is one of the most hollow arguments of them all, because instead of countering any of the points I actually made, it's basically begging me to portray MCE in a better light, with no reason as to why. If I'm going to talk about a Monopoly spin-off game for 47 minutes in a critical way, why would I not directly compare it to the original? Is it not the changes from the original that make a spin-off special and interesting? When you go into the store and see a new Uno version on the shelf, the question is not, what's this completely new game all about? The question is, how is this game different from base Uno? The same can be said for Monopoly spin-offs like MCE. MCE has a well-known game that it is meant to be directly compared to. It's only logical to ask yourself, how do these new mechanics make this new version of Monopoly better or worse? Because you already have an existing frame of reference. If you want me to judge MCE on its own merits, it doesn't change how bad the game is. If I were to chop out that section of the first video describing how certain mechanics from base Monopoly have been altered poorly or removed, it wouldn't make the actual experience of playing MCE any better. Comparing the game to base Monopoly and that entire section of the video is me conveying to you how this game is a worse and less detailed version of base Monopoly, and everything after that point is me discussing how the new mechanics of MCE, what you would call its merits, are an intolerable mess. If you want me to judge MCE on its own merits, I already did. But that's not the full story of the last video. I judged MCE not only as a game, but as a Monopoly spin-off game, and it fails spectacularly at both, regardless of if the other half of that scale doesn't exist. I'm trying to be as fair as possible for the audience's sake, after all. I want to make it abundantly clear that there is no redeeming qualities of MCE, and how not defendable it is. So that's what I did, and that's what I'm currently doing. It seems unlikely for you to accidentally perform a cheat. Just don't make mistakes. In the last video, I argued that a few of the cheats could easily be done by accident, meaning if you did accidentally perform them, and you were caught, you'd suffer the cheating punishment for something you didn't intend to do in the first place. Many commenters seem to think this is an avoidable situation, but it simply is not. Expecting players to be perfect machines is not something that can be expected by any game developer or from any game. Moving someone else's piece instead of your own, skipping out on rent, and moving a different amount of spaces than what's indicated on your dice are all cheats in MCE, and the reason I claimed these could all be done on accident is because I have seen them all happen firsthand on multiple occasions on accident in base Monopoly by competent people. Together, mistakes like these are actually relatively common, and MCE punishes you for them. There are no rules that account for accidental cheats. The players are incentivized by the game itself to capitalize on the cheating of others if they want to win, so it's inevitable that someone will be punished for something they didn't even mean to do. Those are just the cheats that are most likely to be done accidentally as well. There are others that could possibly be done accidentally but are less common and not worth mentioning. This wouldn't be a problem at all if it weren't for so many of the cheats being possible to accidentally execute, but they are. And this isn't even taking into account that stupid handcuff, and how it may not even be possible for some people to fit the thing on their wrist. And how because the handcuff is attached to the board, it's really easy to shift the board accidentally, causing you to trigger the surprise demolition cheat, which involves removing a hotel from someone's property. And once again, relying on all players to be nice, and not capitalizing on events that would boost their chances of winning greatly, even though the game incentivizes you to do this, is foolish. These cheats create an incredibly hostile gaming environment, honestly, but I'm not even done talking about them. Let's stay on the topic of the cheats while we're here. The pickpocket, bank heist, unlicensed contractor, slippery deed, property swap, and extra allowance cheats, as well as several chance and chest cards, allow you to steal anything you could ever want or need in the game for free. Free money, free properties, free hotels, you have it. It's these mechanics that trivialize everything from base Monopoly, and make excessive cheating the only viable way to win. There is genuinely no reason to use anything other than these cheats if you want something in this game, because if you do use another method, you'll actually have to spend money. You'll actually have to land on the property you want by chance. Why leave it up to chance? Why spend money? You need that money to win, after all. This is what I went over in the last video, and I hope that some of the previous points I've made in this video have helped you realize how trivial every mechanic is in comparison to this group of cheats right here. The remaining cheats that I haven't covered in this video don't fall into any general group of failure like the rest do, so once again, I'll go over these ones one by one. The Squatter's Rule cheat allows you to collect rent for another player's property. This is one that would be very easy to do if the actual owner of the property in question was not present for whatever reason, and that goes back to that earlier part of the video where I talk about that very issue. There is now yet another way to punish players who get up from the table, and it doesn't even involve stealing their physical cards. Wow. The short-changed cheat involves you paying less than what you owe for rent, and honestly, this is one that you'll likely never get away with, so it's completely meaningless. The price gouging cheat involves charging more than whatever rent is actually owed, and this ties back into the new player argument I made in both of these videos now. Finally, the escape artist cheat involves taking off the handcuff when you're in jail, and honestly, if there's one thing I've talked about a bit too much already, it's that handcuff, so I'm choosing to leave that one there. Would you look at that? The script for this video is over 3 pages longer than the script of the first one. I guess that means this video will be pretty close to an hour long. Surely that will be enough for this commenter, who wanted me to go more in depth on whichever topics they failed to express in their comment. Surely. I want to thank you if you've made it this far in the video. Like I said, the first MCE video is the most popular video on my channel, and that was definitely one of the many reasons why I decided to make this one. Hopefully this is the last video anyone will ever need if they're trying to form an opinion on MCE. If, after all of this, you still feel like playing MCE, I respect your commitment. Unless, of course, you've never actually played the game before. If you've never played MCE, and you're still choosing to defend it in the comments, I strongly encourage you to write down what you plan to say, play the game for yourself, and then read what you wrote. After all of that, if you still feel the urge to defend MCE in the comments, especially in a disrespectful manner, don't be shocked if your comment makes it into a part 3. Just saying. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like the video if you hate Monopoly Cheaters Edition. A special thank you goes out to all of the people who left rude comments in the last video for fueling the creation of this one. And a genuine thank you goes out to those of you who took the time to write out your counter-arguments in a productive way. And if you have even more counter-arguments, or regular arguments that I didn't cover in this video, feel free to leave them in the comments in a respectful and productive way. Also, feel free to comment about your awful MCE experiences, because judging by the last video's comments, MCE might just be a terrible game. Don't make me make a part 3. Bye!